Okay.
You can have it like that, but it will be very, very faint if I show it.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you which way you
Well, I
prefer.
think we want to show it in the room, so, yeah, I understand live streamers may be somewhat frustrated by that.
I guess actually with the room darkened, we're picking up a lot more than we do with the other stuff.
And it is available through other sources, so.
Let me look at one other thing here.
Sure.
So when 3 minutes out, what I'm going to do is, I guess what I'm going to do is start, I'm going to introduce the panel, introduce myself, then we'll go down the line. You, and then,
Well, I think it may be loud enough there that it's a good idea.
I don't know. So far, all the panels I've been on, everyone's been masked.
Including the ones that are hybrid?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't mind.
We can take off the mask. But
I don't mind.
The guidance is to wear the masks even at the presenters.
That, well, no, the point is, I don't know about the camera and the hybrid.
Yeah.
But, okay,
Yeah.
I don't mind wearing it, I just wanted to do it right,
Fine.
whatever right may be.
Yeah.
You put the movie back on the screen just for a minute.
Can do that.
I guess, so we'll start. So you're gonna go down and do some stuff. I think if you want to.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll get it faint.
And roll right into that initial part.
Yeah.
The portion.
And then we're just going to have a general discussion, and then probably about 30 minutes of just back and forth talking,
Okay.
based on specific topics, and then, that's when we're gonna play the video, and then open up the Q&A.
Okay.
That would work.
Great.
Sounds good.
John, this is a gift for you.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for doing this.
Moderator? Okay. I don't know if you want to do it. There's a lot of 10 to 15 seconds delayed when I started, and it actually starts saying. So when I started, I'll give you a countdown.
We have some good friends in the room. We're all friends?
Yeah.
That we know well.
Well, some of the people we already know are our friends.
Yeah.
Some that we don't know that yet.
In terms of notable folks in
Yes.
in fan history.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
Peter Ballesteri, if I can embarrass him for a moment, is the curator of the Evelyn and Horvath fancy
Remember
collections
to
at the
speak
University of
into
Iowa.
the microphone.
Yes, talking to the microphone.
Thank you.
Make sure everyone has the mic.
Thank you
ready.
very much.
I think
We
we
haven't
might have to
officially
share a
started
mic
yet,
too.
I'm being sloppy. So, but Peter Ballesteri here is the curator of the Evelyn and Horvath fanzine collections at the University of Iowa, which is one of the definitive fanzine collections in the world. And one of the key things they've done is they ran a crowdsourcing project to transcribe a lot of the text in the fanzines, which actually makes them searchable, which for historians like ourselves has actually been an absolutely invaluable resource. So, supporting work like that and say the Fan History Project is vital for us to be able to have these sorts of conversations.
Can it go up on Gutenberg?
Well, so certainly there aren't existing copyrights anymore on fanzine material from that period, generally speaking. I mean, with a very rare exception, right? So based on the copyright laws at the time. So it could, in general. Yeah.
It's free to the public. I mean, it's not behind a firewall, the university, anybody can access it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are we about ready to get started?
You have the answer to that question.
That's right.
Yes, it's 8 o'clock now, so I guess,
I've got a handout here. This was originally circulated at Chicon 1.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, yes. This is
Oh, this is the song sheet.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yes,
yes.
Thank you. This is the first, probably the
Shall I
first
hand this out
official.
to the crowd?
Yes,
Sure.
that's,
Sure, we can all sing along.
Will someone say who this is?
I don't know if I have enough here. We.
Are you going to introduce him or
Okay.
what?
Introduce.
Him.
Oh, him.
Let's see how far these go.
This man's name, who's standing
You can
up,
share one, that would
is,
be
he
good.
is known as Filthy Pierre. He,
Yay!
He has been around our community for a long, long
Can
time.
anyone share?
And
There's not a lot
he-
of conversation. Okay.
He is big in the homemade music we call filking. That, for some of you who don't know, was originally a typographical error for folk music. In the 1950s, somebody wrote folk music, and it's been filking ever since. But our own homemade songs are much older than the word filking. Filthy sometimes plays the filthophone, which he blows into and makes music. He also conducts the convention calendar for, is it Asimov's Filthy?
I might as well take one.
He's
Well, then I
one of the
won't. Sorry.
presidents. What you have just been handed out is a reproduction he made of a science fiction song sheet written by Jack Spear, whom I have roomed with at Worldcons, under his pseudonym John A. Bristol, at his then address of Washington. And you can look at the songs. They are parodies, more or less. And at the very bottom, you will see on the bottom, you'll see Envy is a Louse, which is a reference to a passage in a more or less famous science fiction story.
That is, we believe, the first fanzine reference to that meme, to Yindy as a Louse,
Yeah.
shortly after the L. Sprague de Camp story, The Roaring Trumpet, was published, which has that.
Yes,
message in
and
it.
that was later incorporated in the Incomplete Enchanter.
But we could go
We'll
on about these
save
things
that for
forever.
the piano,
Yeah,
because the
yeah.
piano hasn't started yet, so I think we need to get started.
And one of the things that happens in these panels, you probably know, is that we all try to talk at once, which is why we have him. And the reason
I'm the young one here, so.
the reason I spoke is that obviousness is relative. And one of the things that goes on here is many of us don't know it isn't obvious. So not everybody knew who that man was, and not everybody knew what this was. So at the cost of offending some people, and with the joy of pleasing others, I popped up and spoke.
All right, so let's get started. I think this is an appropriate time. So,
Hold
well,
on.
okay, we have to count down.
Outside audience can't come through you
Okay.
yet.
Yes. Sing it.
Welcome, everybody. This is the 1940, the first Chicon panel. Welcome. So I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. You might wonder why I'm half the age of everyone in this room. I've been working on the convention history project for about 10 years now. I do about 30 cons a year, and I've been writing a history book detailing all these conventions, especially important cons like this one, because remember, this was the second Worldcon. This was basically the Patrick Troughton that had to follow the William Hartnell and basically paved the way for the conventions. I'm going to allow each of my fellow panelists to introduce themselves, and afterwards we're going to have some excerpts from a special speech. So we'll start with you.
My name is John Hertz. I am apparently one of the few people who actually wears a propeller beanie. I know the man who invented it, who's still alive in his 90s now. His name is Ray Nelson, and some other time I'll tell you a story about this propeller beanie. I'm interested in fan history. I don't know nearly as much about it as some people, but one of the things that is important around here is you don't have to be expert, and you don't have to be ignorant. If you're ignorant, you can change it. If you're expert, you can help others, or you can just be annoyed. Anyway, that's why I'm on this panel, I think.
Okay, I'm on this panel because I wrote the history of Chicons that's in your souvenir book.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote a few other things for the convention. But that one tries to map the history of the first Chicon and how it has evolved into this day.
And to remind you, that was the second Worldcon. This is the 80th Worldcon. And for those of you who may not know, there's more or less a continuity of the same community, you can keep running up the numbers. No one else has come anywhere near 8. There's been NorrisCon 4 in Boston, LACon 4 in my town, Los Angeles. That means that despite all the bickering, and there's been plenty, it's more or less the same folks carrying on through, this is the 8th time, which is amazing, astounding, fairly wonderful planetary.
Startling,
Two
startling.
complete science adventure books.
It's famous, fantastic.
Yes.
That's the,
Yes, thanks. Great. So I'm David Ritter. I am the editor of First Fandom Experience. We are a publishing project that attempts to document the history of early fandom. We have a booth in the dealer room. Please stop by if you get a chance. We've published a number of books on this. In fact, we just published for this convention this history of the first Chicon, of the 1940 Chicon. It's a visual history. It contains scans of many of the artifacts that were published by fans of the period. So, and what I'm going to do is kick us off a little bit by talking a little bit about how the first Chicon came to be. So, as many of you know, in 1939 in New York, there was the first ever Worldcon, organized by a group of New York fans, and there was all kinds of drama and excitement about it, and there were factions and fighting, the police were called. And
But don't forget fun. Factors, fighting, fun.
It was fun too. It was a bit of a seminal event. So at that event, there were two high school students from Chicago. One was named Mark Reinsberg, the other was named Earl Korshak. So if you've been at the con, you know that Earl Korshak was the fan guest of honor who we hope to have here with us, and unfortunately was not able to join us. He passed away recently. So,
But he is still the fan guest of honor because death will not release him.
absolutely right. So what you see here, so on the in this photo, you see from top to bottom, you see a very famous fan by the name of Bob Tucker, who lived in Bloomington, Illinois, and was more of an adult at this point. And then you see Mark Reinsberg. In age at least, right? And then
Yes.
you see Mark Reinsberg,
Yes.
Earl Korshak next down, and then at the bottom their cohort, Sully Robards, who was their partner in crime. So they went to New York, and this is according to Earl. So we had the opportunity to interview Earl about 12 months ago before he passed away. And he shared with us his memory of the events in New York in 1939 that led to the idea of moving the Worldcon to the West with each subsequent Worldcon. And so I will read this to you. So this is Earl speaking. I want to give all the credit to Mark Reinsberg. While we were in New York, Mark came up with the greatest idea that there ever was, that the Worldcon should move around. At that point, nobody ever thought of anything but having it in New York that year. He said, why don't we move west? Next year we'll go to Chicago. The year following, Denver. The year following in Los Angeles, going in increments across the United States. I think it came to him as a blinding flash when he saw what was going on in New York. He was a brilliant guy, so he started talking it up. It was very important at that point because the famous Exclusion Act had taken place among the New York fans. All the people were immediately hot for the idea to get away from New York and, quote, get a breath of fresh air from all the animosity. So in some ways, you could argue that the Chicon was a bit of it was a neutral ground between the Los Angeles folks and the New York folks who are fighting. So I just want to say, I think we are extremely privileged today to have with us in the audience relatives, close relatives of both Earl Korshak and Mark Reinsberg. So Steve Korshak, Earl's son, is here.
Stand up.
Stand up, please.
And Dean Ziff, who is Mark Reinsberg's nephew, is here. So do you guys want to just say a couple of words about how your relatives felt about their contribution to establishing this seminal event?
So I know that my dad was a fan first. He loved science fiction. He was one of the few people that was lucky enough to make the transition from fan to professional. And he ended up with a line of books called Shasta Publishers. His lifelong best friend was Mark. They served in the Mount Shasta during the summer one time.
As fire lookouts.
And tell that story. That's a great story.
They were on top of Mount Shasta in the fire lookout, and they brought up a bunch of books, and they would read the books and they toss them over, creating a fire hazard.
This is before we had ecological consciousness.
Yeah.
But and then Mark ended up one of the founders of Shasta with Earl and with Ted Dickey. But they were inseparable, and Mark and Earl. And I know that Earl was the the first auctioneer for the first 14 Worldcons. There was no auction for the first Worldcon. And he also was, I think, the only fan, according to himself, that made it to the first 15 Worldcons. Because other fans were either in the war, or they couldn't make it, they didn't have the money to make it.
Didn't think of it,
Didn't think of it.
believe it or not.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about Mark?
Well, the only thing I would add is more on a personal level. My Uncle Mark and I were very close. I think that of the two of them, both highly educated guys, Mark and Earl. Mark was more of the refined, cautious one of the two, let's say, and Earl was more of the very pragmatic, let's go for it kind of guy. And they made a great team, great partners in that regard. And I recall, just again on a personal level, when I was a little fellow, Uncle Mark had moved to Miami to spend some time in Miami, and when I was maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, and he'd come over, he'd visit, and he would, when it was time for me to go to bed, he would come into the room and he'd shut off the light. Now, don't worry, this is not sinister. He'd shut the light, and we would go on space trips. Just literally. And he would get in bed, we were next to each other, and he'd say, "We're being attacked by aliens! Quick, your force field! Put up your force field! Shoot!" And, and the sheets would go flying. And so it was very, very exciting, and it's something that lasted with me that I did with my boys.
This was the cautious one of the pair.
Right, run.
I also want to mention, so the other person in this photo, so on the far side away from me, you see young Earl Korshak. So can anybody name the person next to him?
His name's on the top there.
Yeah, well, good point, thank you, that's a bit of a giveaway. Yeah, so his name is Robert Madel, Bob Madel, and Bob Madel is as we understand it, the only surviving person today who attended the 1939 Worldcon and the 1940 Chicon.
So there was a thing that the last survivor of the first Worldcon, of first fandom, there was a bottle that they bought, and they would drink it, and it would be a toast. But I guess about a year ago, Earl was 98 and Madel was, well, now Madel's 102.
Would have been 100.
The two of them sat down one night when they were visiting, and they had that drink together.
It only makes sense.
Yeah, I always
As
assume
far
they
as
must,
we know.
given the era in which they come, from which they come, the last man thing was very popular. I always
As far as we know, Bob Madel is the oldest of all.
Yeah.
He's 102, and as far as we know, and there's some people in the room who are in touch with him, his mental health is good, and his physical health, considering he's 102, is still pretty good.
Yeah, great. So with that context, back to our moderator. Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect. I guess to kind of get started, Sue, you wrote a really beautiful history of the con. If you guys checked out the con book, there's a beautiful history article written there. And I want to know a little bit more about what you found interesting with this, when writing the history.
For space reasons, there was a lot I could not put in. But I want to emphasize two things. First of all, this was remarkably ad hoc. They put this together, they sort of had a plan, there were conventions that were being held and they followed it, but once they got started, things didn't run on time. When it was called to order, Mark Reinsberg fainted, and that's how Earl got to run the convention, because she was standing. Things didn't go in order. There was a whole lot of fooling around, and that is the second thing. I could not express, just for space reasons, how much fun obviously was being had by this. There was, I think, about 125 people, and they just did nothing but fool around, do whatever seemed like a good idea. They were tromping off to a newspaper at one point in costume. To give you just one detail, so they had a page of fantasy fictioneers, and these were the people who supposedly donated money to help the convention go. And they did that. So you can see this up here. And they've got Alaska the Gnome, Professor Gooseberry. Some of these might be real. Sam Moskowitz, I know he is a real person. Adolf Now remember, this is 1940. This is a little bit before Pearl Harbor. So
Notice that Adolf Hitler is misspelled.
Well,
He used an F.
no, that's another German of the same name.
I see.
He's got
Anyway,
the
the
different
point is
thing.
some things never change.
yeah,
This is good twin.
this is before the war started, but this and in a few other things, you could see that this was on people's mind at the time. But I don't know if that would have been in the best taste. A lot of things were not in the best taste, but they did it anyway, because sometimes they were sore, and sometimes they were. So that's, my summary is that if you are having a really, really good time, that's because these people started it.
So what did they start at the 1940 Chicon? Arguably, I would say you can always argue, so and it's fun to argue, so if anybody has a different point of view, please share. It really was the first instance of a consuite. So they showed up, and Moroyo, the female fan from Los Angeles, one of Forrest Ackerman's good friends at that point. They had falling outs later, but at that point they were very close. In her hotel room, that became the consuite, and that's where they changed into their costumes for the masquerade, and they had continual parties there. And there are various descriptions of how many people at one time were in her room, going from 10 to 20 to at one point 50, which sounds strange. And it really was, although Ackerman and Moroyo showed up in 1939 in costumes, they were really the only ones in costumes. 1940 was really the first organized masquerade. And we know from the song sheet that we believe that in terms of Worldcon, that was the first filking, the first organized filking with Jack Spear's song sheet. So many of the traditions that survive in Worldcons to this day really originated first in 1940 in Chicago.
Remember, this not only inspired Worldcon, because the Worldcon model inspired all conventions, Comic Cons, Anime Cons, Furry Cons, all come from this source. And we have to remember, this is a transitioning point. Before then, these conventions were essentially one-day meetings in someone's house or the public library. It wasn't really until these Worldcons got started that we were meeting in these hotel rooms, which led to the room parties and the fun masquerades, the fun balls, and the fun, spontaneous singing, which eventually led into Filk. And all the concerts you see at big conventions today all came from these humble beginnings. So
What hotel was it at?
Chicago.
It was at the Hotel Chicagoan.
Which was where, what?
Chicago one.
Our moderator has omitted to mention that the reason he's aware of all this flow is that he has produced, and some of you have seen, a sort of amoeba-like chart of how these things develop from one another. And there's a small version here, and there's a table in the exhibit room. So he's tried to manage the flow, and he's done better than anybody else ever has.
It's my little background in genetic biology. I approach this as if this is evolution. So there we go. All right. So actually, since we mentioned this was this is the first masquerade that's ever been at a con, and also the first cosplay contest. That would be the modern term cosplay contest.
That's not correct. The use of the word cosplay is different. Let's have a footnote some other time.
Okay. Well, the first costume contest. So let's. Do we have any pictures of some of these early costumes? And I think the person who dressed as Ming the Merciless was the first place winner during this time. And there's not as much surviving costumes or photos from this period, which is kind of sad because this is a big part of history.
Yeah.
So I think in the book they produced, there is at least, I think, one group picture that has everybody.
Yeah, hang on.
Okay, no worries. So, aside from that, so filking, the term wasn't you all know the story. The term was a misspelling in the 50s that eventually came there. And oh, there's the costume. There we go.
So this is a group photo. So Ackerman Murillo, so Esperanto, right? So Myrtle Douglas was her name, but she went by her Esperanto name of Murillo. Doc Smith, Doc Smith was as big a fan as he was a writer. He was deeply involved in fandom. He was an enthusiastic fan and attendee at fan events. Pogo, who's Myrtle Douglas's cousin, and Mark Reinsberg here in costume. And then, so this ran in Amazing Stories. So Ray Palmer at that point was the editor of Amazing Stories, based in Ziff Davis in Chicago. So he was deeply involved in this convention as well. So he published this set of photos for the convention, and this little write-up as well. And I'll find the Dave Kyle name photo as well.
And some fun facts about the con. So the official attendance membership was 128 attendees. So it's a little conspicuous because, as we saw on the list, there's some fake names and added names there. So the official attendance roster was also similarly a lot of names that couldn't be confirmed. And actually, this con, the expense was surprisingly $145.
Wow.
Well, but in the money of that time, right?
Yes.
And also, it was much less ambitious than what we do today.
There was no admission, by the way.
Yes.
You could get in for free.
Yeah, anybody could walk in.
They also made a profit.
Yes, that's
Yes, and that's another story too. Do you want to tell it?
They made a profit, and at the end of it, Mark and Earl and Wilson, I think it was just those three.
You mean
shared-
Bob Tucker.
Huh?
Bob
Was it
Tucker.
Tucker?
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah.
His name was Wilson, but he was known as Bob.
Sorry. They split it up, and now, of course, we take the money from one con and transfer it to another con, but in those days, they didn't do that.
Yeah, big scandal as it turns out afterwards. Of course, Sam Moskowitz called them out on it, said, how could you do that? And they said, well, we put it on all the work, and so, we did a good job, and so, yeah, there was some money left over. So there's a great story as well, so about the program book. So these folks, Reinsberg, Korshak, and one of their very good friends, a guy named William Lawrence Hamling, attended a remarkable school in Chicago. So this was the Lane Technical High School. This was an astonishing place. It had thousands of students, and it was a serious high school, but also a trade school, so you could learn to weld. They had a professional.
All male.
Yes, well,
All male.
here, at that time, all
Until
male.
she went.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So they had a professional print shop. They produced a slick, professional-looking magazine every month, Lane Tech Journal. And so William Lawrence Hamling was an editor of that. He orchestrated the production of this program book, but Mark Reinsberg, because he knew that in that town in Chicago lived the John F. Dill Company. And the John F. Dill Company was responsible for a guy named Dick Calkin. And Dick Calkin is the cartoonist who drew Buck Rogers in those times. So this banner in the Worldcon Chicon program book was drawn by Dick Calkin, solicited by Mark Reinsberg, and you can see down here it says Buck Rogers. So you can see if you've seen Buck Rogers comic strips of that period, you'll recognize the style here. So this is memorable. And here you can see the actual program of events, and as I think Sue pointed out, it was loosely followed, right? But you can see a two-day con. And many things going on here, including the projection of motion pictures, which we will come to in a bit, because we have a remarkable little surprise in that regard.
We have to remember, this was before the multi-programming track. This is when one panel was happening at the same time, so it was expected the entire attendance of the crowd to be in one small panel room watching these panels back to back. Surprisingly, it took almost 40 years before we got the brilliant idea we could hold more than one panel at the same time.
So the guest of honor was Doc Smith, Skylark, Lensman, etc. So Korshak and Reinsberg hitchhiked from Chicago to where Smith lived, which was in Jackson, Michigan, 200 miles. Showed up at his door, was welcomed by his family. He was, by all accounts, his entire family were wonderful people. They invited him in, they stayed the night. They let them read the preliminary manuscript for Gray Lensman before it was released on that visit. And that's when they secured him as guest of honor, and that was really when they locked in the convention, because they immediately publicized that. So we've got Tucker helping us, and we've got Doc Smith as a guest of honor, so we've really got this convention in hand. So it gave people people confidence that it was really gonna come off.
I think we're already at the halfway point of the panel, and we have a lot to talk about and a lot to show. I think before we start moving to the video, you show in this fantastic book there is the fun freight trains journey to get to the con, and I think let's fill the audience in on this fun story that it was illustrated in this book as well.
Yeah, so let me see if I can find a photo. So, while I'm doing that, there were two also very young guys, one a little older than the other. One was in his 20s, the other was 17 years old. And so this is Olin Wiggins and Lou Martin from Denver. And here they are. Wiggins and Lou Martin. So they desperately wanted to go to Chicago. They didn't have any money. Actually, they said later we could have actually bought bus tickets, but they decided for whatever reason, lack of funds and/or sense of adventure, that they wanted to get there by hopping freight trains. And they actually did this. And Lou Martin wrote a long set of essays about this that was published in a fanzine. That unfortunately only the first 4 episodes of it survived, not the very last. But they nearly died on a number of occasions. And so you have this romantic sort of notion of riding in hopping freight trains where you get inside of a boxcar. No, they were not able to get in. There were no empty boxcars, so they actually rode between the trains or on top of the trains over the course of 5 days, I think.
Riding the rods.
Yes, yes, and freezing cold at night. But they describe this very eloquently, and it's covered in the book. And this is also available in the Science Fiction Fan was the name of the fanzine. They arrived barely alive themselves, and they told the story when they arrived of the fact that they witnessed the death of a hobo who was actually apparently sort of brutally killed by collision between himself and one of the trains. So that was how desperate some people were to actually get to Chicon. People also came from New York, so the Futurians drove in from New York. They had a car accident on the way. They rolled their car over, but they were able to recover and actually get there. Other folks drove from Boston. So people came from all over the country to join this convention.
And at least one person from Canada. So it was a world science fiction.
Right. And I guess since we mentioned this before the panel went live, so the people who are watching online might have missed the part, but the first Philcon booklet of songs was done here at Chicon as well. Now the Futurians actually broke out into spontaneous singing at the first Worldcon, so that's kind of where we get the evolution of Phil. But the first one where it's all printed, where everyone could sing along with, happened at this specific convention. And John, you were talking about the individual who we had stand earlier today. Yeah.
We weren't.
For the online audience, let's
yeah, we
redo
weren't
that again.
online yet. Filthy, I'm going to mention you again. Seated in the audience is a man known as Filthy Pierre, who has long been a singer of folk songs, and he's published books of folk songs, and he's probably singing here at the convention. And this song sheet, which he handed out to us, is also in,
Yes,
it's also in this visual history that Mr. Ritter published, and it may take me a minute to find it. Do you remember what?
Yeah, I didn't find it.
He's got it.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
and you see, inside,
Yeah.
and, yeah, there it is.
There we go.
There it is. And, at the very, very end, you'll see it says in capital letters, India's a louse, which is a reference to a famous story that was incorporated in a book. So the interaction of science fiction stores and the fans is as old as we've been around. And Mr. Korshak mentioned the transition from fan to pro. Some people thought that there was a stepping stone up. Some people didn't. Some people have been both. Some people went from being pros to being fans. So the interaction of pro writers and fans is as old as we've been around. And some fans have nothing to do with pros, some pro, right? But both.
So this meme, Yingvi is a louse. It comes out of an Elsbreg de Camp story called The Roaring Trumpet. It's a completely non sequitur reference in the story. For some reason, fans seized on this. It's been a meme ever since in fandom.
Yes.
To some extent.
It was like Kilroy was
Yeah,
here.
exactly. It's shown up in official minutes of Worldcon business meetings as recently as the 1980s. And so we, one of the things we did is we recreated the fans' den for 1946. If you haven't seen this, it's at the back of the exhibit area here. And we have a typewriter there, set up a 1940s typewriter. Sure enough, we have a piece of paper in there. Somebody, we don't know who, went up to that typewriter at the con and typed in, Yingvi is still a louse.
Right. So I think since we're at the halfway point, we're going to probably show the video first, and then we'll allow our special guest to talk a little bit about the video. We'll take a little bit of Q&A, and I think we're going to end with you giving an excerpt of the guest of honor speech. I think that's a good way to end off the panel.
That's great. So do you want to speak first and then
Yeah,
show?
let's
speak
you
first
can speak
and then show
first.
the video. Okay, great.
Introduce yourselves and what
Yes.
we're about to watch.
Hi, my name is Bruce Lee. No kidding, not related to the dead guy. I'm here representing Eric Grayson from Indianapolis. He's a film historian and restorer. He's restored this video, Monsters of the Moon.
So this was shown at the 1940 Chicon.
Was shown at the 1940 Chicon. It was edited together by Bob Tucker and Sully Roberts. And here you see images from that. These three guys were mostly responsible for it. I think most of you will know who they are. It was shown to the public for the first time here in Chicago in 1940.
Say who those men are.
These men, yes, let me bring this over.
Sorry.
These men are on the left, and these are childhood and longtime friends. Ray Harryhausen, a legendary animator, are on the left. He's probably the quieter of the three. Met him. Forrest J. Ackerman, you saw him as 4SJ in the list of characters.
Mr. Science Fiction.
Mr. Science
Yes.
Fiction, legendary editor, famous Monsters of Filmland, and of course Ray Bradbury, legendary author.
Wow.
Now, here you see from 1939 the first, can you say first cosplay? I guess it would be first costuming. And that's Forrest J. Ackerman at 22 years old. And Arroyo, that's Myrtle Douglas. And seated on the left in that picture of the seated people, again from 1939, that's on the left seated is Forrest J. Ackerman, and on the right is Ray. But we're not here to talk
If
about.
I could just add very briefly, that photo is from what they call the Dead Dog Party.
Yes. Oh, wow.
At the 1939 Worldcon.
The exact date was July 8th.
July 8th, 1939, but we're not here to talk about 1939, we're here to talk about 1940. There is no concrete documentation that either Ray Harryhausen nor Ray Bradbury actually attended the Worldcon in 1940. Sources cannot agree, but, and there's not a lot of actual media available, you know, no tape recordings, not a lot of people doing film.
Yeah, we're confident that they weren't. So.
We're confident they were not here, but Ackerman did attend the 1940 Worldcon and showed a film there that has become one of the legendary lost films of the ages, Monsters of the Moon. Here's the booklet that Ackerman sold for $0.25 at the showings. It was 25 cents, which was big money in 1940. In Ackerman's words, Monsters of the Moon began in the 1930s as a novelty fantascript illustrated with photos. The fantascript was sent to a New York producer who got the idea from the illustrations that the picture was partially completed and rushed a request to, I gotta see more. Ray Hines and Mike Frisbee were the guys who made it, the makers of Monsters of the Moon. They worked frantically day and night for 5 weeks to make a trailer presenting the possibilities of the film. But only one print of the film is known to be in existence. It was lost in Ackerman's own collection from the mid-1940s to the mid-1950s. He found it again. He wanted to be clear that the film as exhibited here, consisted entirely of discarded scraps that was under or overexposed scenes or sequences of what they considered unsatisfactory stop-motion animation. We'll let you decide that for yourselves. This guy here, Mr. Frisbee, is one of the makers of the film. He's one of the Earthmen. There was no plot, it was only ideas. One plot suggested based on the materials available, this is from Roberts, I believe, or one of the men who put it together. Martians with base cities on the moon attack the Earth with intent to invade, but they find they cannot land in Earth's dense atmosphere. Martians then bomb cities and return to their base on the moon. An Earth ship takes off in hot pursuit, crash lands on the moon. The Earth people find they are not the first to cross space. They promptly get captured by Martians. They see the Martian moon city. They also see the lunar city of the lunar inhabitants who are suppressed. They escape, steal a ship, and scram home. The end. Frisbee and Hines tried to sell their film to low-budget film producer William Pizor, today best remembered for the lousy Bela Lugosi film Murder by Television. Skip it, you'll thank me. Pizor lost a lawsuit about that time and let the project drop because he didn't have any money. Later, Flash Gordon was released and stole the thunder from Monsters of the Moon. So it was created by Hines and Frisbee, was sent to and dropped by Pizor. 3 childhood buddies seen here in 1999 got a print of the film because they wanted to see it. Ackerman showed it here at Worldcon and a few times after in the 40s and 50s. Ackerman and film collector Raymond Rohauer ran the film a couple of times. Ackerman subsequently loaned the film, to film collector Raymond Rohauer, and Rohauer lost the film in the collection of Raymond Rohauer. But that's not the end of the story. On October 1st, 2013, film historian Eric Grayson, Dr. Film at drfilm.net, bought a print from eBay claiming to be Monsters of the Moon. The runtime and length matched Ackerman's description. What arrived was a 16mm safety print on 1930s film stock. It is not nitrate, but it is an old print on stable stock. I'll point out, it has taken longer for me to describe the film's history than it will take to see it. So without further ado, after 60 plus years as a lost film, we present Monsters of the Moon.
Okay, so hopefully the technology will work here. So we're trying to send the sound through the room, but it's not happening, so you're going to have to try to listen. It's just music, so it's not
It
essential.
almost works as a silent film too, but
Yes.
the music, public domain, is kind of nice.
Okay.
Came with it. This is how we got the print. It's been restored, but it is still a little rough. It is misspelled even then.
You could do Mystery Science Theater 3000 on
Oh, look, the buttheads.
Special effects.
Actually, I gotta say, the effects in this film are really pretty impressive in a few places. You'll see.
And these are outtakes.
Yeah.
Those are the Martians.
If you're hoping it's gonna make sense, suspend this.
Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah.
This is like Flash Gordon.
Book Rogers.
Oh, God.
The little droids?
Is there Attack on Earth?
No double entendre anything there. You can little things sitting in your face.
This work is seminal in the.
You went there. You went there. You went there.
I went there.
You went there.
The cave city of the moon.
Ooh.
I'm so scared.
The oppressed moon people.
Oh, my goodness.
Uh-oh.
Don't know what that was about.
The film was a pain in his neck.
They look like Mexicans.
John Fart.
Pretty clear that the guy who did Space 1999 had seen this.
This scene is amazing to me. You look at the animation.
It's great.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think it's just. Super brilliant Martian. Boom. Inhuman.
Oh, wait, the Martians aren't wearing suits.
Where's the fighting spirit?
Yeah. Take that, Alex. We will never know.
Where is Frank?
No, we will never know. That's it.
I would say it's an astonishing survival, and really thanks to Eric who did Eric Racing who did the restoration, and to
Bruce
Lee Brothers
Lee.
and Mindy.
Mindy Grayson.
Mindy, Eric's
Eric's my
sister.
brother.
Congratulations. Yeah, thank you so much, folks.
So I guess we'll open the next, we have 15 minutes left. We're going to try to save the next 10 minutes for questions and answers. Then we're going to wrap up and then end with the original guest of honor speech that was done at that specific Worldcon. So I guess if anyone has questions, please raise their hands about the film or about the con itself, and I'll try to go through the room in order. So it's you first.
Is there anything known about this person who sold it on eBay? I mean, obviously.
No.
No.
No, not really. They did not know what they had.
Oh.
And nobody really knew what they had. It wasn't clear that it was what it claimed to be.
Okay.
Yeah, so my brother is a film historian. That's his job. And he goes through eBay looking for lost stuff. Sometimes he gets garbage, sometimes he gets gems. He got a gem this
So
time.
he would be here, but he is in a convention in LA this weekend,
Oh.
Cinecon, showing a restoration that I've been personally helping with, the restoration of a film called King of the Congo from 1929, the first sound serial. It's partial sound, partial music, very interesting stuff. They just showed it today for the first time in almost 100 years.
So you got the second crew.
I'm sorry that I'm the backup.
Yes, you in the purple?
Yeah, 2 questions. What were the room rates? Because I ask because this con too was my first convention, and when I went back and looked at the room rates for it, I was just amazed. You know,
I know the
I said, you know, I think my total expense for going to that Worldcon, you know,
Okay.
it was less than going to like a WindyCon, you know, so.
So, at the, official hotel, Hotel Chicagoan, it was $2.50 a night. But most fans stayed at the YMCA, was only a mile away, 75 cents. But
Right.
you got access to showers and to typewriters, so it was quite the luxury.
And the music from the film was very Flash Gordon. I mean, did they just take
This
that
was
music, or is it just, I mean,
That
you
was
know?
before Flash Gordon.
Sorry?
It was before Flash Gordon, but.
So
it
did
did-
Flash Gordon steal it from them?
Possibly. Well, we know George Lucas stole the
Well, yeah.
scroll.
Deliberately.
Borrowed, yeah.
And,
When was the
and do you know where the person got that from? Did they find out the person who had this film? Did
We
they
don't-
find out where they got it from?
We don't know how that happened.
We don't know the full story of how it became available. It was from an estate sale.
When was it made?
Okay.
What was your question?
When was it made?
It was made in the 1930s, late 1930s. It wasn't able to get any funding out of LA. They were trying to earn funding for it here, actually. They were pushing for it, and they were starting to get some funds to make this film when something happened in the December of 1941 that kind of upset that.
Cause I'm pretty sure that Flash Gordon is 36.
Yes.
And that's the exact same music that's in
Yes.
Flash
Yes.
Gordon.
They borrowed, well.
That's why I asked.
It was public domain.
We say stole the thunder of, you know. We don't know, we think this came first, but wasn't successful. We're not sure.
Sure.
Alright, any other questions we have? Yes, you in the far back.
What methods did they use to advertise the existence of the convention?
So, I know some of that, but.
Oh, I guess we'll repeat the question for the online crowd. What was the method for advertising, promoting the con?
Yeah, so primarily fanzines. So they distributed through fanzines. They also got some marketing coverage from some of the pulps. So they wrote letters to the pulps, and particularly Amazing Stories, given Ray Palmer in Chicago was always a fan, started as a fan, longtime fan since the early 30s. He promoted the con in Amazing Stories as well. And so there was, fans at that point, they wrote to each other constantly. Actually, there was one poll that said, how many letters does a fan write in a month? It was 43 was the average number. They wrote, that was the social media of the day. They wrote to each other constantly, and fanzines were really the way that they communicated.
All right, you in the center, you have a question? Yes.
It's not a question, it's an observation about music and Flash Gordon. The third Flash Gordon series, Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, got its music entirely from Franz Liszt, Les Preludes.
Okay, so he said.
In the red, did you have a comment? I thought you had.
It didn't have anything to do with this. I was gonna ask this gentleman, Stanley Korshak. I was just wondering, was that an uncle of his or whatever?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Stanley Korshak was Earl's uncle.
Okay.
Yeah, related to the mom. Yes.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah, for the online crowd, the previous gentleman talked about how the music from Flash Gordon serial was borrowed by Franz Liszt. So that's probably is that what we heard?
Yeah.
No, it
Okay.
wasn't.
It
was
the
List
third
Like
series.
Music.
Looks like music, alright.
Yeah, Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe.
Yeah. Right. Flash Gordon conquers the universe.
All right, so a couple of images here. So we know it's the Hotel Chicagoan, because here is Forrest Ackerman and Maroyo, standing in front of the Hotel Chicagoan with the sign.
Does that building still exist?
No, certainly not under that name. I think the building may still be there, but it's not, certainly doesn't exist under that name. And so one other set of photos, by the way, so the photos that you're looking at now have not been seen anytime recently, because they came from an archive at FanX. So actually, my son and I made a pilgrimage down to Joseph Clary and Edie Stern's home, and we dug through boxes and boxes of old photos down there and uncovered some of these. And so these are photos from the Chicon that have, some of which are known, but some of which are not. So here's what the room looked like, and you can get a sense of that. Outside photo with a bunch of folks. This is Trudy Kuzlan, who was a very active fan then, and a major participant in the festivities. And so here is Doc Smith. So, you know, I think I started reading science fiction when I was 12. I read Triplanetary, and it changed my life, right? So you know, Skylark, Lensman. So he was the guest of honor. And we have one other remarkable survivor here, which showed up in a totally random auction lot that I will share with you. So this was the transcript that was republished. But this is something that showed up in an auction lot. Near as we can tell, this is authentic. So now you know how much it cost to go to the banquet. It was $1, right? And this is an actual ticket from the actual banquet.
When the first time that the fee was raised at a convention from $1 to $2 was a notorious event and caused all sorts of ripples.
Right. So if this is a good time, I will read a short excerpt from Doc Smith's guest of honor speech from the.
And tell them it's in the book.
It is.
The show is on, it's in the book.
Yes. It's here. This is in quotes. From the contemplation of any one isolated object or fact, completely competent mind could envision the entire cosmos. This thought, while of course not original with scientific fiction authors, has been used by several of us. Neither was it original by Goethe, with Aristarchus, or with Diogenes. In fact, it was probably not original even with the almost mythologically ancient and anonymous sages of Thebes, or was it Chaldea, whose glyphic writings seem to be its oldest known source. For such is the cogency, the fundamental rightness of the thought, it must have been evaluated as by the first real thinker of our human race. That tremendous thought automatically became my opening paragraph, for it would take a mind almost that able to comprehend adequately the significance of this convention. For it, and the as yet nameless something of which it is the outgrowth and the manifestation, meaning fandom, have a profound and baffling motivation and connection. Do you know why we are here today? Having thought about the matter superficially, if at all, you do not. However, I have studied it for weeks, and I cannot say that I am much the wiser. This is supposedly a convention. I have attended dozens of conventions for business, for work, and for play, but this one is unique. It is entirely different in almost every phase from the other. It seems to me then that what brings us together and underlies this convention is a fundamental unity of mind. We are imaginative, but with a tempered, analytical imaginativeness which fairy tales will not satisfy. We are critical. Sometimes we have been called hypercritical. We are fastidious. We have a mental grasp and scope which does not find sufficient substance in the stereotype, the cut and dry. We feel intensely, and we are not always either diplomatic or backward in putting our feelings into words, and sometimes into actions. The foregoing is submitted as a theory, not as a fact or as a law. Under this theory, we shall continue to convene. While we will probably never become a very large group, it seems obvious that the necessity of possessing what I may call the science fantasy mind does not now, and probably always will, limit our number to a very small fraction of the total population. We will continue to grow as more and more of those who are already with us in spirit join us in person. We will
we will meet somewhere every year, and every one of us who can possibly do so will attend. For in these personal meetings, it is in this intimate contact of minds so uniquely qualified, there is a depth of satisfaction, a height of fellowship, which no one who has never experienced it can even partially understand.
I think that's an appropriate place to end this panel. I want to thank our panelists for joining us here. This is a very special event. Can you believe there have been 8 of these events that have happened here in Chicago? So, round of applause for our panelists. And do you have any parting words, anybody? Any last words you want to say? Anything you want to plug?
The motto of this convention I approve and urge to you, which is take to the stars.
All right.
So we have a limited number of Blu-ray discs from the collection of Dr. Film, Eric Grayson, and it includes not only Monsters of the Moon, but a lot of other stop-motion animation stuff. If you're into that, this is it's got Willis O'Brien's early works. It's got Identifications. It's also got Bungle in the Jungle from 1949, not the one you're thinking of. It's also got the Marx Brothers stop-motion animation animated pilot for a television series that never got picked up. It's available at David's booth, limited number there. I've got some with me, but also available on drfilm.net. Go to the shop.
Code is back here.
And we've also, since you're the first to have seen Monsters of the Moon in 80 years, I think, 82 years, we've got buttons, a limited number of those available. If you want, you pick one up on your way out the door.
The Hotel Chicago, it is now the First National Bank building.
Thank you all for coming. Make sure you check out David's booth as well. His fantastic research they've been doing should be nominated for a Hugo, so putting that out there. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your time here at Chicon. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We didn't even get to the singing any.
Yes. So, we are in the process of doing so a number of them. So we got the
Anybody who didn't get one of these that wants one?
I got one.
Yeah, okay.
I got one. The last time, I have one. I wanted to shake your hand. The last time we met was at Worldcon last year, and I was wearing a badge that said Claude Degler. And you said to me, I wonder how many of us here actually know who that is. But great to see you all.
That's something we can do.
So many little things like that. But no, I just want to thank you so much. This is great. Maybe Henry remember the story that years ago about how he had just bought for And I said, I mentioned then for $25. And he said, I didn't have
Well, during that also, his keys, was that is about the same. Somebody catch the calendar. So we can't just look at the number.
No.
It has to be comparison.
When I talk to students and I've got the tables covered in gold magazines,
Yes.
I see that they're anywhere from 15 cents to 25 cents. That's when I always say that you have to understand that you could have gone to any good diner and bought an enormous meal for that 25 cents. So, and that was a choice that was made for a long between a good meal and a magazine.
Okay. It's, watch the screen for a sec.
Oh, it's gonna ask for confirmation, yeah, okay.
It's saying, do it again so I know you really mean it.
It's not too far from the price it was then.
That's right. No, but it's hard. I don't understand with David at his table when someone walked up and looked at it. And said, look at the price. Well, it's just it's absurd. It's absurd.
Well, sure.
To think that. No. There's something.
The point is, you gotta have a context.
Thank you very much.
So when they passed away, I don't know.
Has ever?
That'd be great. That'd be great. They had cellulitis. In this one, here's the big news. So I have been buying wearing naturals and then also Lems, and I've got the Lems boots. I think the Lems boots are really good.
So do you have
you should read
Just like around. That's why the service all
which is
and
Rockford.
it because I
Polka is one of the brands. I've got those coming when I get home next Tuesday.
but 1940, those are just among the dots.
Perfect, thank you very much.
So
This is the
the
new
thing
thing. They really think.
is to bear in mind.
It's not available, I'm still writing it. The problem is, the more and more I go to clubs like this, the more, information I learn, so.
It's the first best thing to be verified. And I have a course probably like 5 years because the shows are just as good as anything. And, I mean,
There's historical firsthand.
even they don't stink, so.
Then there
And
was
we think of the
the
big
first
stuff that's
one,
getting from us.
which is still in existence. That's right, John Cole, but you are the one from your experience. There's yet another, right? So all these things ideally cooperate.
Exactly. So our just fantastic.
Right, that's why, that's right. And other people,
This project is
like
amazing.
Hillary, you stay in touch with them, their perspective isn't quite the same. Which can be good. I'm in. Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Right, I hope so, I'll look for you and you'll look for me.
Yeah, have fun. I will be on the other, trying to attend some of the.